Welcome to the Chairing the Board video series launch. My name is Kevin Honu and it's my pleasure to open this launch with a karakia. Nō reira, e tau nei ki rungi a tātou katoa, te wairua mā mātua tūpuna. Nā rātou I whakatakoto te araheihi koina mā tātou nā uri. E whakatōki a tātou nākau ki ngā tikanga hei arataki a tātou. Kia nākau nui ki te hāpai a tātou mahi katoa, I roto I te pono, I te tika, I te māramatanga. Me te aroha no tētahi ki tētahi, ko ia rā e rongo, whakairi aki ki runga kia tīna, tīna, haumi e hui e, tāi ki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora koutou and kia ora, and thank you so much, Mātua Kevin. We have been very lucky at the National Strategy for Community Governance to have Kevin's wise guidance and leadership through the process. So thank you, Kevin. And you're also going to see Kevin starring in some of the videos that we will show a bit later. But welcome everybody to this, the amazing first action of the National Strategy for Community Governance being delivered. Today we are proud to launch the first action, the 4 videos that are there to help chairs. Chairing the board is an incredibly difficult role. Before we start, we want to acknowledge that we could not have done it without the amazing community trusts, and you'll see all their logos below, who got in behind us and backed us to be able to produce the actions that in the action plan. So without them, this would all not be possible. So we are very grateful for their generosity and their backing of us in our desire and all of our desire to support community organisations to be as strong as they can be. What I thought I'd do to start off is just to put a bit of context around today. For many of you, you would have been a part of the National Strategy. You'll be very familiar with the action plan, but for those who are joining and connecting with us for the first time, welcome. Welcome to this mahi that is all very passionate and we're all very determined to work on. So the National Strategy for Community Governance began with a group of community leaders, and the aim was to support the 500,000 of us who volunteer for the boards of community organisations. And I personally know how much of a tough gig it can be. I've sat on boards for nearly 2 decades, and it can be incredibly daunting, and there isn't necessarily a lot of support and training for what can be an incredibly complex role. Last year, we launched the National Action Plan for Community Governance. Over lockdown, 150 community leaders came together, mainly over Zoom, over lockdown, to develop the 15 actions that make up the action plan. And these are actions that we all worked collectively to identify that would be what is most needed to support community organisations, the boards, to be as effective as they can be. And as I said, today we are here to launch the first action, the first cab off the rank. We acknowledged as part of the action plan how difficult and lonely it can be being the chair, and that of anything, there's so few resources to support chairs in their leadership role. So here it is, Action 1, a set of 4 videos that were designed by the chairs of community organisations for the chairs of community organisations. And the content and topics that are covered are those that were identified by experienced chairs as the things they really wish they knew, particularly when they stepped into the role. But before we formally launch the videos, we've got a couple of pieces of housekeeping. The first one is, I know everybody online will be pretty familiar with Zoom, and you'll be very familiar with the chat function. We're really going to rely on that in this session. So if you've got any comments, any thoughts, please put them into the chat. And in a few minutes' time, we do have an amazing panelist, and we welcome your thoughts and your questions to them. So please use that chat function, share if you've got insights that you think others would be interested to know, if you've got resources to share. This is our space, this is our community, and it's our opportunity to share. But also, before we get on to the formal launch, and we have some teasers for you of the videos so you get a sense of what's happening, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to somebody very special. Now, as we said, we've been very lucky with our funding, and we've been able to appoint a full-time program manager. And we have the amazing Rose, who is joining us as the program manager. And because she is full-time, she's dedicated to this, we'll be able to progress the remaining 14 actions even faster. So we're really amazing. This is such an opportunity to get this mahi done. A little bit about Rose. So Rose comes to this role with an extensive experience in management and governance across iwi, across community, and across governance in organisations. During her career in both local and central government, Rose has led environmental, te ao Māori, sustainability and infrastructure large-scale transformational programs. And her governance experience, which is incredibly vast, includes chairing the Keep New Zealand Beautiful and co-chairing the Endangered Species Foundation. But Rose, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody who's online? And I guess this is the community of the National Strategy for Community Governance. And welcome, Rose. She's pretty awesome.
Tēnā roa atu I tō mahi, Joe. You've done such an amazing job, and feeling it's a big shoes to fill. So thank you to everyone for such a warm welcome. I'm really looking forward to just continuing on the great work that's been done and working right across our communities of Aotearoa. So very keen to connect. I love working out in our regions, very much a regional person based in Rotorua, so very much a local girl. It's wonderful connections right through different levels of our community. So I'm really looking forward to continuing on this kaupapa. And thanks, Joe, for the wonderful work that you've been doing and will continue to do as well.
There we go. So as you can see, the National Strategy for Community Governance is an incredibly experienced and amazing hand. So thanks, Rose, for joining us. But I think what we'll do now is get on to what we're really here for. So should we have a bit of a teaser? Obviously, we can't play you all the videos all the way through. It would take far too much time. But okay, no, first I am going to introduce our panelists. You can probably see them online. So you will see that we've got Prabha Ravi, and you're going to see her on the videos as well. She has many roles, but one of them is as the chair of the Hutt Valley District Health Board and Consumer Council. Kay Marie Dunn is joining us as well. Again, you will be lucky enough to see her in the videos and hear her thoughts on governance in the community sector. She's the director of Making Everything Achievable, and by gosh, I know she does do just that. And welcome to Roger Pallaret. He is wearing his hat here as the chair of the Wellington Community Trust. Again, you will be lucky enough to see and hear him in the videos and gain some of his insights from that role. And a warm welcome to Garth Nolan Foreman, who is, of course, the partner at the Leeds Centre for Not-for-Profit Governance and Leadership, and a huge expert in this area, and has a particular passion for supporting chairs. And one of the key resources we're sending people to is that Garth has initiated a forum where chairs can go and to share a special space just for the chairs of community organisations. So Garth, that's an amazing initiative. And welcome to the panel. So we will see the teasers. We will have a chance to engage with our panelists on some of the topic areas covered in the videos. There'll be a lovely close from me, and the fantastic Matua Kevin will close us about 1 o'clock. But can we see the videos? Some teasers now, please. Drum roll, here we go.
The first video is about getting back to basics, the key things you need to know to get started as chair, what the role is all about, and how to chair a great meeting.
My first meeting as a board chair was, I keep wanting to say shit. Okay, my first meeting as a board chair was really challenging. I felt like I was it, and that all eyes were on me, and that I needed to have the answers for everything. So
one of the things that I would have like to have known more about is the context of the organisation. In other words, the history, where is it at, how has it operated, and where do I fit into the scheme of things, and what can I do to help with the transition or whatever is required.
The time is the biggest, huge thing. I didn't realize how much time I was spending outside the board meetings. It is a lot of preparation in terms of making sure you've got the agenda item, you've got the guest speakers. If you have to have some guest speakers come and present something to your board.
As chair, there are a couple of things that you are responsible for more so. So things such as board conduct in the boardroom, making sure that the board meetings are being well conducted, things like agendas. The chair's the one who manages that relationship with the CEO. They're responsible for things like board performance, so evaluating individual performance and making sure there's processes in place for feedback around that and the performance of the board as a whole. From a personal perspective, be kind to yourself. No one is expecting perfection, and actually perfection doesn't exist. I think it's just about making sure that you're really prepared, ensuring that you've worked in with the CE to agree on a really good agenda and what you're wanting to get out of each agenda item. I think it's critical to understand what the outcome for each topic is, so that you can then ensure that that occurs during the meeting.
The content for these videos was created with the input of more than 30 experienced board chairs, based on their experiences and what they wished they knew when they got their first chair role. This second video is about the dynamics around the board table and your role as chair, making sure the board gets on and gets working.
When things go wrong around the board table, it's because something has not been communicated clearly in the first instance. Being patient and communicating as clearly as you can is one of the keys to resolving an issue around the table when it doesn't go right. And that's generally because of miscommunication or poor communication.
The high-performing boards are really focused on a small number of issues. Okay, so they are firstly clear about where they're trying to go, and then they're clear about why we're not there yet.
Code of conduct is something I think is really important for boards, so that everybody understands why we're there and what our purpose is. And also I use that as a tool to share expectations of each board member around the table, so that they know and they have that really clear understanding and clarity and buy-in prior to their first board meeting.
I love having the Constitution there. I'm that person where they're like, oh, here she goes, she's got the Constitution out again. Or the governance manual, because for me it's important that there are some good guidelines that are documented that help us work through what we're supposed to be doing in the meeting.
The dynamics is a kind of second order issue. I think the first thing is to make sure that people know what they're there to do. So for many organisations, particularly ones with few or limited staff, boards are there both to govern and to help out. So the first thing to do is to separate those roles. Are we here with our governing hats on, or are we here with our helping out hats on?
I use their name and I involve them. So I'm really in favour of being inclusive around the table. And sometimes it is about personalising questions and specifically going around and affording time to each person to contribute to the conversation.
The content for these videos was created with the input of more than 30 experienced board chairs, based on their experiences and what they wished they knew when they got their first chair role. This third video is all about your role in helping your board be strategic and develop a great strategy.
There's some prep work that boards should do long before they start implementing anything via the Chief Executive. And there are a range of ways they can do it, but they should definitely have an environmental scan. What's out there that is either an opportunity or a risk that we could position ourselves into or remove ourselves from.
What I find is people, they come from the ground up and they end up in the governance role. So it's a real shift paradigm shift for people to think strategically and look at the big picture. What I have found that works is having a really clear agenda that keeps their focus on strategic discussions, not so much the administration and ticking things off. That's nice to do. That can be 5 minutes at the end.
I think a really important feature of keeping a board strategic is to make sure they have a very clear sense of the purpose and the mission and why they're there. And different organisations have different purposes. It's really important for the boards to have a clear idea about what the purpose of their organisation is.
Having a strategy that is outcomes focused, so not focused on the doing bits, but on where the chair wants the board to go and what time frame and how they might state that and measure it.
Especially dealing with media, we have a saying, what would that look like on the 6 o'clock news, basically. That's the test for our accountability. So any decision that's made is often tested through what would that look like on the 6 o'clock news.
For me, to keep us strategic, we try and keep our main goals in front of us. We keep revisiting it when we have our meetings together, and then we also weave that across into our WIPs, which are our work in progress meetings, so that the team are aware and they keep those goals front of mind as well.
The content for these videos was created with the input of more than 30 experienced board chairs, based on their experiences and what they wished they knew when they got their first chair role. This fourth and final video is all about your role leading risk, compliance, and other good board processes.
It's actually not the board's job to do the compliance. It's the board's job to ask the questions and to make sure the processes are in place, and for management then to report to the board.
The way that I operate is that I definitely keep my ear to the ground, especially in media. I watch and see what's going on in the Select Committee, in particular Māori Select Committee, so I see what is quite critical issues that are facing Māori. Hey, I'm big on social media, so I watch and see like key Māori influencers and understanding what they are talking about so that I can stay abreast of critical issues. And Māori media.
The main one is to oversee and protect the organisation's purpose or vision, its values and its resources. So that's a really important part of the board's responsibility. The board is also responsible for representing the interest of the stakeholders, actually, that are affected by the organisation within the context of the purpose. And sometimes organisations forget that actually we've got a whole heap of people out there we report to.
We have to accept that risk is part of the job, and it's important. And there is unacceptable risk, which the health, safety and wellbeing of your team or lives are in danger, like that's unacceptable risk versus other calculated risks that you might take to help your organisation move forward.
So what I suggest to people is you basically identify the 5 risks that will kill the organisation, if it's reputational, money, financial, and you start monitoring that and you think about how can we mitigate it.
And even if someone says, I don't want to become an expert in investment markets, they have to be explicitly and openly prepared to rely on the other people around the table who are, because there's no excuse for not knowing. You're just as responsible whether or not you know or not.
The content for these videos was created with the input of more than 30 experienced board chairs, based on their experiences and what they wished they knew when they got their first chair role.
So there you go, just a teaser of the 4 videos, just to give you a kind of sense and also to showcase some of the amazing talent that is involved in those videos. The first video looks at back to basics. So it's what does a good chair need to know to be able to do the job? And it's really, I guess, aimed particularly at aspiring chairs, at new chairs, but also those who've been in the job just to check, have I got all the basics right? The second one looks at the issue that we know can be quite tricky for chairs, and it's managing the dynamics around that board table, how you manage conflict, how you manage to make sure everyone's voice is heard, and how do you actually have a very good meeting and make good decisions. The third one is about strategic. We know that many of our boards can be focused in on detail, and many of our board members are actually the doers in the organisation. So how do we create that space for strategy? How do we make sure we're doing those governance functions as well as getting the mahi done in the organisation? And the last one is focus on process. All of us know there's a lot of laws and regulations and they change. How can we find ways of really effectively managing what we need to comply with and managing risk? And there's some, in each of the videos, there's incredibly practical tips. There's a voice of experience, there's a voice of expertise, and we were trying to make it as practical as we can. Each of the videos finishes with our top tips. Here's just a few things that we hope that people could take away to improve their progress. All of the content was developed through a co-design sprint with experienced chairs, with aspiring chairs. So we know that it's exactly what people need. So we really hope they're useful resources. They will be shared on a range of platforms, including hosted by LEAD, the Institute of Directors, the Centre for Social Impact. And if you are an organisation and you'd like to have them on your website, of course, these are completely open and free sourced, so they're yours to share as widely as we can. In fact, we encourage you to share. We will be sending a link and all the information out after this, so you've got access straight to the videos. But first, let's have a bit of a few tricky questions and get our panel warmed up here. As I said, we've got Kay Marie, Garth, Roger and Prabha with us, and you would have noticed some of their faces as they are starring in the videos. But let's start with my first question for the panel, and it's really related to questions or content that came out in that first video, Back to Basics. And one of the themes that came out through all our talking with chairs was the actual time commitment. Being a chair can take 2 to 3 times more than being a board member, and it's all volunteer time usually, and it also can be quite complex and tense. So I'm going to throw it open to our panel. How do you manage that? How in your chair roles do you manage that time commitment? How do you succeed in the role, given often it can be quite demanding? And I'm just going to use my superpower of voluntelling and ask the person who's next to me, which is Roger. Roger, how do you keep up with the chair role?
I think it takes personal discipline and commitment. You actually need to be motivated to be doing it. If you feel like it's a chore or a job, or, oh no, I've got to look at these papers, I've got to talk to this person, actually it won't work. It's got to be motivated by your own sense of mission and excitement about what it is that you're doing. And that also flows into leadership for the other people on the board. I mean, they're looking to the chair for that motivation and for the relationship and for the sense of togetherness about what it is that you're doing. And that's where the motivation comes from. And then the time just kind of finds itself, I find.
Absolutely. Good advice there. And can I just encourage, if anyone's got any questions or any tips they've found, can they add them into the chat, and I'll make sure everybody gets either your wisdom or we'll put your questions to the panel. But next we'll go to Kay Marie. Kay Marie, how do you manage and juggle the volunteer roles, the leadership roles, the chairs, paid mahi, sleeping, eating at some stage? How do you manage it all?
Yeah, it's pretty tricky. It's tricky. I think that if I think about the length of time I've been involved in governance, I started when I was 14. I'm 40 now, and I've traversed so many different organisations, and over that time I've learned a thing or two. I've made some mistakes, and I think one of the biggest parts when I reflect back on where I am today, where I was, is that often we take on way too much, and trying to coordinate and organise yourself amongst living life is really challenging. So there are 3 things that I put in place now. I'm really grateful for virtual assistants or assistants to be able to help you manage your calendar, because I think that's super helpful. I think having a really awesome intentional to-do list to get things done is really important. And I also really believe in digital tools and apps that can help remind you and support you to get things done. But similar to what Roger said, you have to be really committed to getting the mahi done. So basically you need to be prepared for your meetings, prepared with strategic questions, and get through the mahi as efficiently as you can. But I don't know if there's any like secret trick to it, other than I just feel like I've gotten better at saying no and not taking on more than I need to.
Yeah, and that's another tip that Leslie has kindly shared with us through the chat. Just be disciplined and not take on too many roles. So sometimes it's saying no, isn't it? And knowing that you do the ones you're doing incredibly well. So thank you, Leslie, for your insight. And thanks, Kay, I've got a question from you that's also come through the chat. How do you manage as a chair when perhaps your members aren't as prepared as they should be, like they haven't read their papers? What do you do?
Oh man, you can be stink about it, and you can make you could really make an example of them. But I think there are threefold. I think you have to be really clear about your expectations. I love inverted agendas where the strategic objectives of the meeting is present, but I think also to create an environment where if you come to another meeting and you're not prepared, either A, we're going to have a conversation about it privately, but then we're actually going to raise it as a group, because ultimately you're slowing the waka down if you're not prepared for the hui, and therefore that's on you. It's on you, bro. You need to tidy up.
Nice, and I can imagine you say that and you land it. So yeah, Kay Marie, I would come to your board reading the papers. Yeah. Thanks so much for your insights. Prabha, I know you have multiple roles, you have multiple hats. How do you manage being chair? How do you manage the demands of the chair role?
Sure. Just I think it's very important being mentally prepared that this involves a lot of time, and being extremely organized and disciplined and prioritizing, because I feel that if you don't know that there are 2 meetings coming up and you have to juggle at the last minute, it just becomes so chaotic and you have stuffed it up for everybody. So it's just most important that you are well prepared and you have a schedule, you have your to-do list, and you know your timetable really well, that these are the meetings that are coming up and these are the work that I need to do following those previous meetings, the action points or organizing things, whatever that is, and collating the board papers as well. So it's quite a lot of, I would say, discipline and prioritizing, organized, and planning your time really well and executing it in a way that people feel, yes, she is well prepared and we want to participate.
Yeah, it's really, that's a part of the key, isn't it? But I'm just going to pop a question to you that Dallas has asked. And she just wondered, do you think you need to have experience as a board member before coming chair? What would you say from your experience?
I would definitely say being a board member first, and then taking on a chair role really helps, because it's just understanding different styles of chairing as well, and also the different sectors, and also just the dynamics around the board table. How are they managing conflicts? And if you're suddenly thrown into a chair position without having an understanding of what the board members' obligations are and accountability is, I think it becomes too overwhelming. And, it's just going to be a failure most of the time.
Yeah.
I
think Prabha's suggesting that understanding the dynamics of the board will make it so much easier to chair it. So yeah, good wise advice there. And Garth, I know you have some very clear views about the role of the chair in leadership and time management. What have you found works in your experience?
Well, I think Roger has really highlighted the most important performance criteria, and I'd use slightly different words. I'd describe it as, if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. This is a voluntary job, so if you're not having fun, it's time to readjust. And I think there is a big trap here. Too high an expectations of what's on the chair's table, and too low an expectation of what's on ordinary members' to-do lists. And it's very easy as a chair. I see myself falling into this trap time and time again to just take on those extra responsibilities rather than share them around. But basically, apart from convening and conducting the meeting, there's nothing that a chair does that can't be allocated to someone else. A chair doesn't have to be the board's main link with the manager. Another board member could be the link person with the manager or director. A chair doesn't have to be the main public spokesperson. Another board member could be the spokesperson. I like to have portfolios, share the work around, and to recruit people at the beginning, as I think Kay Marie said, recruit people with the expectations that there's jobs for everyone on this board. Because if there's too big a gap between the ordinary board member and the chair's responsibilities, we're setting ourselves up for a difficulty in succession planning. Who's going to want to step up and leap that big gap? We've got to make that gap as small as possible. And part of that is actually shedding some of the roles that we assume only boards have to do.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. We do tend to take it all, chairs tend to take it all on their shoulders, that kind of, and that's kind of potentially what we think, like the hero leadership kind of model, when actually there's a team around us. Garth, that's really incredibly wise advice. Thanks so much. When we think then, if that's the first video that's really going to look at those basics about chairing, about meeting, about all the things you need to do to get a handle and get on top of the job, the next video is really around board dynamics. So that's about how do you build a team that's going to have a lot of different perspectives, but make great decisions. Now, if you take that we're all volunteers, we're often very passionate, we often hold very firm decisions, but we need to work in a consensus way to make decisions. Do you know, it can be really difficult if you're in that chair role trying to keep, I don't know, to make sure everyone has a voice, to manage the differing perspectives. So this has come up in our questions a couple of times as well. How do you manage it? Kay Marie, we'll start with you. How do you manage like conflict, and how do you manage the dynamics around your board tables?
Well, I am a lover of a conflicts register, and that it's the responsibility of board to fill that in. But then, of course, from an operational perspective, it's important that you actually review it and we have a discussion about it. So in our meetings, we have 5 to 10 minutes just to discuss if there are any conflicts that arise. That's really important. I think too that we have to support and empower the chief executive or the general manager to be able to feel safe and comfortable to not only talk to what the kind of core operational responsibilities are, but to also feel comfortable to talk about their fears and concerns about the role. So if they're struggling mentally, or if they're struggling with risks or issues, that they can feel comfortable to be able to talk to the board honestly about that. And there's always a challenge between the separation between you know, the board of governors and also operations, and that's really important. But I definitely find in community organisations, and even more so in Māori organisations, there tends to be a blur. So that can sometimes work well, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think great open communication is really, really important to keep the team moving forward successfully.
Yeah, wise advice there. Roger, how have you managed conflict around your board when people just don't agree?
I think the essence of it is that it's people, and that you're sitting in the same room, face to face, close together. And oftentimes, you know, people who have known each other for a period as well. So the quality of the underlying relationship and the ability to listen and to understand and to bridge build. I think often a chair can be in the role of being a solution finder and a broker and a finder of consensus around a room. And that's actually one of the hardest things for a chair. You can't let sort of differences become embedded or you know, things be consolidated in a way that then you can't deal with and go forward. But it's the relationships, and it's the face-to-face, and it's also the underlying sort of sense of of common mission, and we're all trying to do the best for the same outcomes, and then mature people together ought to be able to resolve conflicts, and a chair sometimes has to help.
Yep, very wise, Roger. Prabha, I know you talk about in video 2 quite a lot about the actual process you use in the meeting to get everybody's perspective out. And also we often have some people who take up a lot of time in meetings and some that are very quiet. How do you manage that so that everybody's voice is heard?
It's pretty much just having a code of conduct and setting the ground rules very clear right from the beginning, and just reminding people that we are here and we want to hear everybody's voice, and we want to make sure that everybody's input is taken on board before a major decision has been made around the board table. So it's not the chair's responsibility to make the decision, it is a collective responsibility. And everyone should feel that. Everyone should feel that, yes, they have contributed to that discussion. And even if the decision that we make ultimately based on how we have agreed to make decisions may not be in favor of what they had said, but they would have felt good that they have had the chance to say what they wanted to say and why they don't agree or disagree with that particular topic. So it's very important that they feel a sense of that they've contributed to the whole discussion. And that's something that I have been always keen on. And just even sometimes if somebody has not spoken and can't be bothered sometimes speaking because they feel they're not being heard, I'll say, your view is very important for other board members to hear, and please share that, and let's see how we can come to consensus.
Sounds good. And it's a point that Suzanne has made. Sometimes we have the opposite problem where we have groupthink and people not wanting to raise issues when perhaps we do as well. So that your point of encouraging people into the conversation is well made, Prabha. Garth, some interesting questions have come through about the chair and CE relationship or general manager. You know, not all of our organisations have the CE position. How have you seen that work really well, and what advice would you have for chairs about getting that kind of relationship between governance and management as tight or as good as it could be?
Right. Now you made me switch my mind. So I do want to say one thing about conflict first before I move to that. The specific question that you've raised. I think conflict is great. The alternative of unanimity is absolutely dangerous. Consensus is not the same as unanimity. Consensus means we can talk together, hopefully construct an even better solution because of our collective wisdom, but we can all agree to live with it. It doesn't mean unanimity. And I think that's the problem. Often in our sector, we use the word consensus and so we make decisions by consensus. And what we mean is we force everyone into a silent unanimity, which is often a false unanimity. And the real discussions then happen in the car park afterwards or the corridor beforehand. And that's really what's dangerous. So I think we should welcome conflict. And because if there's not differences in the people, in the views and the discussion, what's the point of having a meeting? We could have sent a memo. So I think, and there are about 10 common participatory methods that we can use to make sure people feel engaged. And I think the biggest problem with most boards is that 90% of the time we only use 2 of those: open discussion and reports and question and answer. And there's another 8 or more common participatory methods that we could use in decision making, which we don't really take advantage of. In terms of the chair's relationship with the manager, again, I'd say this is about not becoming too exclusive in the relationship. It's really about building a relationship between the chair, the manager, and the whole board, so that the whole board have confidence in the chair, in the manager, and the manager has confidence in the board. And again, this requires similar kind of approach, really, talking about it rather than silence. So if there are niggly concerns, it's really important to raise them early and to be obviously to do it in a courteous and respectful way, but to not shy away from saying, look, this actually just worries me a little bit. My concern is this, or The risk I'm afraid of here is that from all parties in the process. So we need to build that culture of honest discussion. And part of that is about just naming it, talking about it before there is a conflict arising, and especially recruiting for it. I'm a great believer that people should actually sign a contract for their board membership. And part of that contract is a commitment to say what they think in a respectful way to the group, to turn up, to prepare, to do other things. But I think we should have those expectations laid out and very clear at the recruitment stage, and just reinforce them by our own behaviour every meeting that we come together.
Sounds good. That's fantastic advice. And many boards use charters and code of conducts, and for exactly that same reason, that you are, if you've got something to say, that you commit to saying it. So thanks, Garth. That's very wise and timely insights. When we look at our third video, and this has come through in a number of the questions you've asked too, which suggests we might be spot on the money here, is how do we keep it's all about strategic. So obviously the board has the I guess ownership or the responsibility to ensure there is a purpose for the organisation, and to ensure there is a strategy. That doesn't necessarily mean writing it at the board, that it's done in consultation obviously with stakeholders and management, but that there is some strategic things happening, that there's high level policies, high level direction, but it can be a real challenge, particularly in some of our smaller organisations, when we are not only the governors, but we are, all the staff, and we're doing all the doing as well. So my question to the panelists, and it has been asked, as I said a couple of times in the chat, how do you keep your board strategic when it needs to be? Roger, what's your thoughts on that?
I think the most useful tool that the chair has got for doing that is the agenda, and making sure that your agenda is dealing with strategic issues. And where there are operational things, I think they need to be quite clearly ring-fenced within the agenda. So if you do need to dive into less strategic things to sign stuff off or to provide some guidance to management, then that's a ring-fenced and limited conversation, and it doesn't flow over into the other higher level strategic things. And I also think that there's got to be a discipline amongst board members and the ability for them to hold each other to account on that. So if someone is wanting to dive into the weeds, it's not necessarily the chair's job. It can be other board members who can say, actually, this is too operational for us now, and can we move on? And I find that other board members are actually quite good at doing that amongst themselves.
Yeah, sounds good. And your thoughts, Kay Marie, how do you create an awesome strategy and then focus on it?
Well, yeah, similar to Roger, I think strategy is probably one of your most precious taonga of your organisation, and then together as a board, we're always needing to keep our eye on the horizon, and too often we sometimes can get caught up in the weeds. I think it's always important that we keep our heads and our vision tightly focused outwards. And I think some real practical tips on that is ensuring that that your agenda and your focus is on those strategic matters, and you get that done first, and that your focus at each meeting to just discuss those strategic objectives, and then also our strategy, our vision, mission, values as part and parcel of the documentation. I've seen some great board minutes where those kind of core points are on each page of the minute, so that you're always staying abreast of what the strategy and the outcomes are, and that you're always reflecting on a regular basis on how far are we tracking in regards to achieving our strategic objectives as a group.
Yeah, good point there. Just keeping yourself on focus. So, okay, well done there. Now we've got a real raft of questions that have come in that I'm going to move on to now, that are probably more around our last video, which is what called Focus on Process. Now there's a whole lot of processes that boards need to do in order to be high performing and add value. They need to recruit people that can create a fantastic team with a skill set, with a diversity of skill set. They need to help those board members get up to speed, the induction process, but also how do you keep on top of all your legal requirements, your process, your regulation, your regulators, and all those kind of things that are coming for us. One of the questions in the comments, just to acknowledge, was around the new Privacy Act, and our boards thinking through what that means in terms of their policies and in terms of the services they operate. But a really interesting question here for our board. Roger, how do you keep on, I actually will go to Garth, Garth, how do you keep on top of all of this, all of that's coming with boards, and not only from externally, but running good internal processes, your recruitment, your induction, having a diverse board?
Right. Sort of sounds like, how do you do everything? And part of that is
lunch.
Part of that is is answer the first question. Don't try it. Spread it around. You're not, as the chair, you're not the only person looking for what laws changes, what compliance requirements there are. And in fact, I think sometimes it's actually worth paying for a governance secretariat support who does some of those boring things that you need to get 100% right, like putting in returns and making sure you're complying with all the obligations that you have. Especially once you get above a certain size as an organisation, it can be a very wise investment, I think, to make sure that is happening well. And especially if that's not something you enjoy doing. If you love that kind of pedantry, go ahead and do it. But that's not me. So I'd rather pay someone else to do that, or get another volunteer who likes it. There are people who like to be precise and make sure everything is complete and thorough. The other part of this question is about paying attention to the board's own self-development. And of the four main functions of boards, most of the research shows this is the one that is least attended to. We tend to be fairly good at strategy and stewardship in most cases, and pretty good at stakeholder relations, but our own self-care and development often gets put on the back burner. So I think it's worth having an annual calendar where you put into the various meetings of the board the things that need to be done on this cycle of the earth around the sun. It will include some review of how we operate as a board during that year. It will include some recruitment and succession planning. It will include some board training and development identification. It will include all of those things that we need to orient new board members, to improve our systems and pay attention to ourselves. It's like the small business people say, you'll never succeed in small business until you stop working in the business and also do some work on the business. And there's a similar point in governing. We have a lot of governance tasks to do, but we need to reserve at least a small chunk of them in terms of making sure we're governing well. And I found the best way to do that is to make an appointment with yourself, schedule it into an annual program of agenda items that the board needs to pay attention to.
Absolutely. Good advice there, a practical tip about how to get on top of everything that seems to be coming at you. Prabha, a number of questions have come through around recruitment, particularly how hard it may be to recruit given the increasing liabilities on board members, but also how to recruit diversity to a board. And I know this is something you're passionate about. Have you seen some boards that have done this well and what they've done?
Yeah, sure. Even in our Consumer Council, we were very particular that we had a really good mix of members who come from different backgrounds, like the disability sector, people who had some health background, and so many different ways of looking and fishing for talent, and people who are really keen to put their name forward. So when we were going through the selection process, we did make sure that we did cover off all the diverse aspects of what we were looking for when we were forming the council as well. In other boards, I think proactively, sometimes the advertisements are being made that we are looking for specific people with these kind of skill set or this kind of background, or so then that makes it easier as well when you are filling a role after someone has finished their term. So it is just understanding the metrics of skill set as well. But also the ethnic diversity, I think that's kind of becoming more and more important, not because just because they've got an ethnic background, but also the way of life or the way they think. Bringing that different perspective is quite important to some of the boards, especially in health or education or sports, where you want to involve a lot more communities coming together. I think actually looking at organizations that have got registrations from those communities, like Office of Ethnic Communities or Ministry of Women, all sorts of different spaces where you could go and look for those kind of specific people that we want on the board as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabha. Unfortunately, we are now running out of time, and apologies to those who've posted questions and we haven't been able to. But what it is showing us is that there is definitely this space where we as chairs need to think about the leadership and support. I'm just going to throw it open to our panelists just as an end, if anyone has got anything they would like to say as closing remarks, just to give them a moment. Anything you'll say, Roger? Closing remarks.
Actually, one thing I would say is that the whole project that we've been talking about here, about producing these videos and the resource, is a tremendous thing. And the videos are an awesome resource for people. So I think that it's incumbent on all of us to try and spread them as far and wide as we can, because anyone who looks at these 4 videos is going to have a whole lot of practical new things to think about the role that they have as chair or potential chair or as a board member. And there are thousands of organisations with people in them who could usefully be looking at these documents or these videos.
Yeah. About 120,000 organisations, Roger, just to be aware.
Yeah, exactly.
Kay Marie, final thoughts from you.
First, I just want to say thank you very much for organising this particular tool. It's amazing, and it's been really valuable and helpful, I think, for anyone that's going to be entering into governance. And to have it all in one place is really awesome. There are heaps of questions that have been raised today that I think are really helpful as well, so probably we can capture those and make sure that the resources are available for whānau to come back to later. I just wanted to mihi to you, Papa Kevin, as a board member of a marae or chairman of a marae, and to those that have come in who are in Māori governance roles. There's a lot to be learned from Māori in governance and the real unique dynamics that our people have to contend with, and also those that are involved in Pacifica roles as well, that I think would be really valuable to share these insights with those of you that are interested in governance as well. And just and thank you, Joe, for being a wonderful facilitator and host for us all.
Oh, kia ora, friend. Thanks so much. Garth, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to echo that, how important it is that we do concentrate on ourselves, that will make our organisations and I believe our society a better place as a result. And I think that's, if I had to sum it up in 2 things, it would be higher expectations for every board member before they come on, and sharing the role so we can have lower expectations of the chairs. And if anyone's interested in the next lunchtime chairs forum, which you mentioned, Joe, it's on the 19th of May. Details are on our website. People can find that for themselves. And I just noticed that Pip asked about bullying and getting rid of difficult board members. The most useful resource that I've come across was a great little blog called How to Sack a Board Member with Grace. And it's because we do have to do it with grace. These are volunteers who contribute a lot, even when their behaviour becomes quite negative for the organisation. So we have to get both things right, being firm but also being a little bit graceful in how we do it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, Garth. And Prabha, your thoughts as we close?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say thank you. Joe, you've been fantastic with, even getting to this point of having these videos and doing the sprints. So a big pat on Joe's back. But I would just like to say that just because we are experienced chairs or all of us have done this role for a while doesn't mean that that's the end. We are constantly learning. And even these videos, I have learned so much from others who have shared some of their insights into their experiences and how they have managed. So it's a continuous learning process. And I think even other board members can teach us a lot, even if we are chaired. But so it's learning from each other and learning from other chairs. And I would like to see something like a community of chairs, community of learning for chairs, where the chairs come together and share and bounce off ideas at some point. When we are able to do that, would be very useful next step as well. So it's a fantastic resource, and a lot of our ethnic communities will benefit from this resource as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabha, and what an amazing panel to you. And as I say, you get to see many of these fabulous panelists in action in the videos, and you get much more in depth about their insights. So just to recap, there's 4 videos. We've been through the high level content of each of the videos. All the content was designed by chairs for chairs. You will be able to find the videos, and they will be hosted on a number of sites, and we will be sending out the links straight after this. So you'll be able to click straight through. The Centres for Social Impact will host them. The Institute of Directors will host them. LEAD will host them. Volunteering New Zealand will host them. But also, if your organisation is connecting with many organisations, or you think it would be useful for you to host them, let us know through the contact, because as I say, they are completely free. A success for us is that they get used and are useful. Please share them. That's the point for them there. Connected to the videos are a large number of resources. We basically point you to places that we've found really useful. They have really practical resources, lots of templates, and lots of high quality, useful and applicable places to go. So attached to each of the resources are, if you've got specific questions, you should be able to find your way through with those resources we've attached. But of course, if you have got more resources and you'd like them shared, we obviously have this network that we can share them to. But I'd just like to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for the support we've had all the way through the process of the National Strategy for Community Governance. Remember, this is Action 1, and there's 14 more actions to come, including a mentoring program for board members, including some sort of app where you can get the templates that you want exactly quickly, a code that looks at what is good, and a whole raft of other fantastic goodies there as well. So thank you all for your ongoing support in helping us to create these resources. But now I'm going to leave the last words to Matua Kevin. Kevin, would you close us, please, my friend?
Kia ora. I think the thanks have all been said for you, Joe, and the panelists, but I'd also like to add my thanks to the people who supported the presentation in terms of making sure the video and everything went well. Nā mihi nui ki a koutou e tirohia mai nā, e whakarongo mai nā. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Ka tō ki a koe hoki i a Kay Marie, mō tō mihi. Nō reira, hei whakakapi, unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, me te arawa irua koe raia e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga ki a tīna, tīna, haumie hui e, taiki, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.